It's kind of insane just how loaded the Switch holiday season is. Because the narrative all year long has been like, the Switch has no games, there's nothing to play. And yet, when you actually look around, when you actually play stuff like Monkey Ball, Unicorn Overlord, Princess Peach Showtime, Echoes of Wisdom, Mario Party Jamboree, you are hit with absolute nothing but banger after banger. And with games like Mario and Luigi Brothership and Yeast 10 Nordics on the way, we have a really solid holiday season for the console. And of course, we have upcoming major releases Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends ZA, which, by the way, are not going to be cross-gen releases. This has been the big cope among Nintendo circles for a long time, Pretendo circles for a long time. I just saw a Rule of Two review release a video like, oh, Prime 4 needs to be on the next Nintendo console. Why? Like, what purpose does that serve? It's been a Switch game forever. Like, why would switching consoles now would just be a waste of resources? Like, what exactly are these people like? Who are these people trying to fool? Like, we have way too many upcoming Switch games in 2025 to think the Switch is coming out anytime soon, right? It's possible we might go through all of 2025 without a new console, right? Like, I don't know how likely that is, but considering just how many like major games are coming out in the near future, like, I wouldn't rule against that, right? Like, again, the whole idea that the next console is coming imminently is just a cope and is kind of deflecting from the reality of the situation in that Nintendo is the market leader. They have no competition. PlayStation and Xbox are flopping left and right. Like, all of their major releases are just going downhill. Like, it makes sense, I think, to wait to reveal the next console until GTA 6 comes out, right? The PlayStation 6 and the PlayStation 5 and Xbox One have their one relevant game, and then like we go back to how things were before with like the Nintendo dominating everything. It's I don't necessarily see a reason for Nintendo to put out a new piece of hardware now. If anything, considering what games like Mario Party's are doing, right? When I look at those numbers, when I look at like the usage of the Switch technology, to me, it looks like a lot of the Switch tech has been very underutilized, especially like the IR sensor and the HD rumble. Now, that's not Nintendo's fault entirely. I would like to emphasize the big reason why the Switch has so many like release droughts is because of like the incompetence of third party developers. But when you see what's happening here, when you see like the games that are coming out, when you see like how stellar Nintendo's release schedule is, how they're putting out like banger after banger all year, and you see like the industry try and like downplay that to try and write them off. Like, last year we had Baldur's Gate 3, right? This irrelevant CRPG from a mid-sized studio that was supposedly better than everything Nintendo put out that year, right? What happened? Pokemon outperformed it, Zelda outperformed it, Mario outperformed it. And not only did they do better, they also will be remembered more and have like a real legacy and remain relevant as opposed to Baldur's Gate 3, which is going to go down the Skyrim route of just being forgotten in a decade, right? It doesn't matter if your game sells 60 million units if you can't follow up on that and continue putting out high quality games with your organization, right? Where are the Elder Scrolls follow-ups? Where is a proper sequel? Where are the spin-off material? Where is like new IPs from the studio, right? What has Bethesda been doing for the past decade, right? Nothing but blunder after blunder after blunder. While Nintendo is innovating and just dominating in ways that really people can't even really fathom, honestly. Like, it is insane looking at games like Tears of the Kingdom and just seeing just how cutting edge they are and just how far ahead they are of the rest of the industry, right? You can't look at Baldur's Gate 3 and seriously tell yourself that that game is more sophisticated than Tears of the Kingdom. And it's only going to get worse. right? We are going to see a massive power gap between Nintendo exclusive developers versus the rest of the industry, right? Monolith Soft is perfectly capable of putting out games that are hundreds of hours long, way longer than Baldur's Gate 3. They're going to have more in-depth storylines, better gameplay, better mechanics, better visuals, probably better romance mechanics if we're being honest here. Like when you really look at like what Monolith Soft is doing, it is incomprehensible to think that they are not in a position where they could easily surpass Bethesda or Larian or any of these other like mid studios from Slop. In a lot of ways, they already have, right? And Monolith is just one Nintendo subsidiary. They're not the only ones. They have the Fire Emblem guys. They have their internal teams. They acquired Next Level Games. Retro Studios is about to make a comeback with Metroid Prime 4. Like, what does anybody have that's going to compete with any of that? Like it's kind of sad looking at like top 100 PC games ever lists and seeing like people cry about how Power World or Undertale aren't on it, right? Like that is the competition right now, right? It's not like some big innovative AAA RPG that's like hundreds of hours long. It's like some shovelware indie game that knocks off Nintendo properties that skirted copyright laws somehow. Like that is the reality of Undertale. That's the reality of like Pizza Tower. That's the reality of like a lot of these derivative indie games is that they're just inferior knockoffs of something that Nintendo has already done. And because of the scope of these developers, they can't surpass what Nintendo is doing now. Like I remember 10 years ago where people seriously thought that Mario would fall by the wayside because 2D indie platformers were the same thing but better. And what happened? All of those platformers started becoming a joke. They all started becoming about like overcoming depression and what it was like being a lesbian. You know, None of them like really innovated or really did anything with the actual gameplay mechanics. Meanwhile, the Mario IP wanted to do, expand the 3D world landscape. Mario Party, Mario Sports, 2D Mario, like a new strategy art game, with Mario Rabbids. Like, how exactly are PlayStation and Xbox going to compete with that? Again, it's kind of laughable looking back at Baldur's Gate 3 and just seeing how quickly it's been forgotten. Seeing just how what's going to happen here. Looking back on it, Twilight Princess, that was a game that was similarly mocked and derided compared to like other games that came out around the same time. Specifically the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. And look where it is now. Like, look where Zelda is now compared to Elder Scrolls. Larian is in the exact same position. All of these people are in the exact same position. They are not in a position where they can compete with what Nintendo is doing on their hardware. And what's more than that, Nintendo is branching out into other pieces of hardware, right? They produced Alarmo, and I guarantee you that it's not the only thing they have available coming through the pipeline. Like, this is going to be a major thing going forward. I think that the third party developers, like the people who tried to ruin Nintendo, gaming journalists, Sony, Microsoft, Sega, right? Like all of these people, like they all failed. It's crazy thinking about how in the start of the generation, people like the Danganronpa guy and Falcom, like they were trying to say that like they would never support Nintendo consoles ever. Like Falcom was very adamant about that they were very loyal to PlayStation. And in the end, they had to port their games to Nintendo because nobody was buying their games. Like everybody was just waiting for the Switch version. And I think that's becoming like the common thing for gamers right now is just wait for the Switch version. That's the thing. Like when you compare these late ports of like third party games on Nintendo consoles you can see that they do way better than they do on Steam. The big thing everyone's trying to talk about now is that, like, oh man, Spider-Man 2 is coming out on Steam. Well, Yakuza Kiwami is coming out on Switch, and I really do genuinely think it's probably gonna do better than Spider-Man 2, right? That's an IP with like actual credibility. People actually enjoy it. People actually like the games. Like, if people really, really wanted to play Spider-Man that badly, they would have just gotten a PlayStation 5, honestly. And the fact that like the game couldn't even sell consoles, like what makes you think people are going to go out and buy Spider-Man 2, especially after the first one was such a middling experience, right? What about Spider-Man 2 makes it better than something like Arkham City? The reality is it's not even close, right? Obviously, these developers are stagnant. They can't innovate. They can't do anything with their brands. And they've just been like spinning their wheels for honestly 20 years now. Basically just copying the RE4 formula, just having everything be a cinematic, keep improving the visuals, like doing everything except making good games. And I do think that's the big thing that needs to be understood about this, because I keep seeing people do this thing where they keep trying to blame the failure, the gaming crash, on wokeness and like the behavior of like the SJWs. No, 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 no. This has been going on for a long time, right? It's been going on since the 90s. Okay. The real issue with these corporations is that they simply don't know how to make video games. They're not good at it. They don't have developers on their board. They don't respect the process. They enable bad business practices, and you've been seeing this everywhere except for Nintendo. And that is the real reason why Nintendo is going to dominate the console industry. This is why the Nintendo monopoly is upon us. And this is why Nintendo is the only company that will survive the gaming crash.